everybody. We were wondering how that was going to play out.
Yeah. We were first going to talk a little bit about doing some fighting here, but we don't know about all that. But our topic today, conflict. I gotta just ask, Dewey, when I think about this, we just got through Thanksgiving.
Lots of conflict, probably.
Conflict at your Thanksgiving?
Well, actually, not really. I spent Thanksgiving with a chosen family as opposed to my real family.
Chosen family.
So we really didn't engage into a lot of conflict there. But I did get to visit with some family and stuff. But no, we were fine. We were fine this year around.
This year, okay.
Yeah.
Is there like an app for that where I can choose a family that I want to go spend the holidays with?
Maybe, I don't know. Probably.
Well, it is. It's interesting when we think about this and we think about the holidays as we've now gotten through Thanksgiving and we're heading into the rest of the month here of December. There's a lot of joy, a lot of giving, a lot of goodness.
And a lot of stress. A lot of stress.
Yeah.
Conflict is kind of an interesting thing. And in the workplace, some of the statistics we posted here beforehand, it can be very, very costly.
Absolutely.
For an organization. So let me ask you, how would you define what conflict is in the workplace?
Oh, man. When I think about conflict, it truly is someone between two people where someone else's needs just aren't being met.
Okay.
And I think of different approaches to this. We are all different people. We come from different backgrounds, different experiences, and we all have different needs.
Yeah.
And so when we come at something and we aren't seeing those needs being met, it can cause that kind of conflict.
Yeah, it really can. I look at conflict as a lot of differences that people have.
Right.
We all kind of see the world a little bit differently.
Right.
But I think that in the workplace, when those differences really lead to a point where it negatively starts to affect things,
Right.
your productivity, your results, your teamwork, your morale. But when it really starts to negatively affect the team in some way, I think that's when we need to kind of think about how do we step in and kind of resolve that conflict. Now, I know other people that prefer this definition, okay? Yeah. It's the confusion that is created when one's mind overrides the body's basic desire to choke the living daylights out of somebody who desperately deserves it, right?
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So I think we all kind of have an understanding of what conflict is. But tell me, have you experienced, I know I personally have experienced conflict where it's, it's not that big of a deal. Then there's other times when it's a real big deal. So have you experienced the same?
Absolutely. No. Yeah. And I think I want to be clear for our viewers too, that conflict doesn't have to be bad. No. Conflict is actually really, really good. Mm-hmm. And so it just gets to a point sometimes when it's not managed properly that can create kind of those negative situations.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of know what you mean. I think conflict is often kind of a progressive thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes it starts off with those differences. We just kind of see things a little bit differently. But, if you can still remain respectful with one another, you can kind of probably work through some of those differences, can't you? Yeah. It's not to say that we're always going to have to see the world from the exact same point of view. But if I can understand where you're coming from, and we can, and you kind of understand where I'm coming from, then chances are when we respectfully communicate with one another, that we're able to kind of maybe come to compromise or to collaborate or to find a third alternative, right?
Right.
And that can really lead to a lot of those differences. Can lead to, like you said, I think to a lot of innovation, a lot of great ideas, things we've never come up with before.
Right.
But when we start to kind of disrespect one another,
right.
I think that conflict moves, into what I would kind of call the idea of discord. Mm-hmm. And I think in discord, what we got folks that have their own what's best for me kind of mentality. So they're kind of unwilling to listen probably to one another, or, it's just about focusing on getting what I need. Right. And I really don't care whether or not you get what you need. Okay. Mm-hmm. But I've also been in some conflicts where it's even worse than that.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so that's what I would kind of call this idea of dispute, where conflict's in full swing. I think here, though, the paradigm is more about a lose-lose kind of relationship, right? It's about, if I can't win, then maybe being a loser isn't quite so bad, as long as I can take you down with me.
Right.
I kind of take a look at those kind of stages in terms of, as a leader, I guess, and a supervisor or whatever. I kind of like to assess the situation first. Right. You know, what stage is this conflict in? I also kind of like to take a look at how committed the people that are involved in conflict, how committed are they? Because I don't know about you, but I've been in some situations where, you know, it's a pretty nasty conflict, but they're not willing to work on a solution, right? They're not committed to doing that. So, and then the final thing I kind of like to look at when I assess things is how competent are people? You know, I think some people are really good at resolving conflict. It's kind of like a skill. The more you practice it, and that doesn't mean I want everybody to go out and get in conflict, right? But you know, some people are really good at it. Other people struggle with it. So, absolutely. You know, it's just those three questions kind of come to my mind. Are there things that you look at when you're trying to assess conflict situations?
Well, I think the people first and foremost. It is. I think that is a key element to it. Okay. But I want to see their comfort level with conflict, and I think that's where, as a leader and as a manager, supervisor, you have to know your people well enough to know how comfortable they are with conflict, and that kind of leads us to the question we pose to our viewers. Yeah. How comfortable are you with conflict? And oh wow, Ray. She said she doesn't like it. Did you know that about her?
Yeah, I get that.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
She's so confident and has such assertiveness. That surprises me.
She's probably much better at it than she gives herself credit for.
She is, yeah.
But I will say this, you know, a lot of people, I don't like it. Yeah. You know, it doesn't mean that I can't deal with it, but it is also one of those things that I just don't really care for so much. You know, as that blue personality that really wants everybody to get along, I find it somewhat difficult, you know, once in a while. But I have to be cognizant and intentional about what I can do to kind of help other people through it. Yeah, but it's hard work.
Well, and I think it's interesting for me when I think about conflict and my comfort level with it. It differs based off of who I'm around, like who I'm in conflict with. So, for example, I don't like conflict in the workplace because we're all trying to be productive and get things done. And so I tend to kind of shy away from conflict in the workplace. Yeah. However, at home, I think other people would say differently.
Absolutely.
And it's just our comfort level with people there. And probably being around them my whole life, I'm a lot more comfortable engaging in that conflict.
Yeah. You know, another element I like to look at to assess conflict situations is the power differentials. You know, let's face it, you know, it depends on where, and maybe that's why in the workplace it can be a little bit more uncomfortable. Right. You know, you've got people at different power structures, power levels, and authority and that kind of thing. So that's another thing to kind of take a look at, you know, and to what degree do I have control over this situation? But the one thing I'll always remind people is that you will always have control over how you react to any situation, regardless of whether you have the power or the authority over that situation. But you will always have control over how you respond to that kind of thing. So something to keep in mind.
I do think it's interesting. We often hear that, and everybody has said it probably once in their lives, but I can't believe you're making me feel this way, you know, and that whole thing that's really what starts sometimes this conflict situation is you thinking that someone else is making you feel this way, but they're not. Like, we control our own feelings. Yeah. So, let's see. Teresa says that she wants to flee when conflict arises. Life's too short for conflict. Yeah. So, it is. It sometimes can be very scary.
Sounds like
people.
Teresa and I got a kind of kindred spirits there.
That's what. Yes, very much. I'll tell you though. Sometimes, and maybe this is why I like it so much in the home is. When you talked about earlier, the innovation and the creativity and the new approaches and new ways to do things that can come out of conflict, that's really cool. And there's no other way that we would evolve as humans if we didn't face some sort of conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, hopefully we're all learning from those conflict situations that we encounter, you know. What worked well, what didn't work so well, what do I want to avoid the next time that I go into that. And frankly, I just don't know if we take enough time sometimes to kind of be more self-aware, debrief with ourselves about conflict and how we've kind of handled it. Yeah. Ray's talking about sometimes her brain gets hijacked. Absolutely. Those emotions can really take over, especially we get into those later stages of conflict, you know, and your emotions just kind of have a tendency to take over that. What is it? You're going to stand up and fight, you're going to end up in fleet.
Right. The fight or flight. Absolutely. Yep. So just to recap what you were saying at the beginning then, as far as the stages we kind of look at, and I want our viewers to really understand this, if you are managing employees, you're looking for where are we at with conflict? Are we in the differences stage where things are like, okay, maybe some good can still come out of this?
And if that's the case, then as a supervisor, maybe I don't have to get so involved. Right? I can allow them to work through it if I notice that they're communicating respectfully with one another, if they're working on it and coming up and I see small steps towards progress. Why would I want to get involved with that kind of thing, right? But if they're it's at a later stage, well, then maybe I do need to get a little bit more involved, right?
When we start seeing that discord stage, and a lot of things, a lot of times I like to tell our clients that we work with when we do this training is you're going to start seeing the allies being created during that kind of discord stage. And so, like, can you believe they did that?
It all takes place at the water cooler and the coffee pot, right?
It does. And so once we've hit that point, it might be some time to
get involved.
Yeah. And then definitely, if you've waited till we get to the dispute stage, then that's too long.
Yeah, absolutely.
Too long. So, when I also am kind of thinking about this, I know that everyone has, and this is kind of what we're going to really branch off in this session about, different conflict styles.
Oh, yeah. And so one of the best tools that I can offer up here is the Thomas Killman instrument. And so the TKI instrument is from two researchers. So this is Kenneth Thomas and Ralph Killman. And this has been around for a little while, but what it does is it kind of helps us assess what our natural kind of conflict management styles are, if you will. And there are 5 of them. And so I kind of want to go through each one of them, perhaps, and we can kind of share war stories.
Absolutely. Yes.
Now, the thing is, before we get into this, is that I think it's important for everybody to recognize that one style is not better than the others. They're all very, very helpful. But as human beings, I don't know about you, but we really do act in very habitual ways once in a while. So I bet everybody that is listening has probably operated from every single one of these conflict management styles. Absolutely. But we probably have some that we go back to over and over and over again, right? It's that habitual approach that we sometimes take to it. So we're not being so intentional. So I think the trick is with this information is to assess the situation, right? And then to choose carefully and intentionally, what kind of style would best get me to the results that I'm looking for. Okay. And so I want everybody to kind of keep that in mind as we go through this. Now, this is really going to be based off, there's 2 variables, and you know what they are. Tell us what they are.
So, oh, wow. My brain, hold on, just went, you put me on the spot there, Dewey. All right. So it is based off of the fight or flight. It's based off of what your interest.
Well, yeah, concern for yourself, right? How, to what degree are you wanting to get your own needs met in this situation? And then the other is the concern for others, right? So to what degree do you want to make sure maybe other people get their needs met, right? And so those are the kind of the 2 variables that this is all based off of. But the first one, style, is about avoidance, right? So what goes on with you when you avoid conflict?
It's usually me removing myself very slowly from a situation, going to my office very inconspicuously, and shutting the door.
Oh, so that's what happens every time you shut the door, right? No, just joking. I think that's right. I mean, we avoid people, or we avoid issues,
even the situation,
or we avoid even the situation that we think could possibly cause conflict. And so that can be somewhat difficult. Yeah.
Christmas bells ringing for us.
Yeah, that's okay. Is an angel got his wings?
That's right. That's right. It is December now.
The one thing I would say about this is this becomes a habit for you.
Right.
The idea of avoidance. Then it can really, it can be somewhat difficult then, because oftentimes what you see is people taking on a victim mentality here.
Yes.
That, oh, woe is me, I avoided the situation, so they won, they got to do what they wanted to, so I'm just going to blame you for everything. And so that's somewhat difficult when you take on that victim mentality. And I would encourage everybody just to kind of remain more proactive about things rather than that reactive situation. But there are times when I think this style is very helpful. When would you think that would be helpful?
Yeah, I think when we're looking at situations where we don't have a lot of skin in the game for, that we're not as concerned about, it's more important to us that the other person kind of gets what they need out of the situation.
Yeah, there's lots of times when I think we're arguing, or we find ourselves in conflict over the smallest, littlest things, and when we kind of back up and kind of reassess the situation, it's like, well, that's no skin off my teeth, right? Why not? Maybe accommodate or avoid the situation. If the issue's unimportant, here's another one. And again, this kind of goes back to that level of authority. But if you have absolutely no chance whatsoever of satisfying your concerns or getting what you want out of it, why would you want to get in there and fight? When you could just probably avoid, maybe think about a different approach later on, might be another good thing. And I would also say, don't stick your nose in where it doesn't belong, right? So if other people can resolve the conflict, why would I even want to get involved with it, right? If I know that it's not really affecting me so much, other people, I don't want to step into the middle of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
If I know that they can, successfully resolve it, because as a supervisor, it could start to impact other people. So I want to keep an eye on it, but at the same time, if I see that progress they're making, why would I even want to step into it?
Sure. And I think that is certainly knowing your people and knowing kind of what their go-to would be when it comes to that, because you can't just avoid everything. Right. That's going to create a lot of issues within the other colleagues in the workplace. Yeah. So
okay, so that was number one.
That's number one.
Okay.
Yep.
So number two is the idea of accommodation. So how would you describe this kind of style?
Yes, person. Is that me? No, I think that, yes, I think truly when we think of accommodating, it's just giving in. It's kind of acquiescing a little bit. Yes, I'll take it. Sure, whatever you need. And really that's because you feel like there might be no chance in getting a part of the pie. But I also think that part of that is because it is more important to them and it's not as important. So it's kind of in the same ballpark as the avoid.
Yeah, when I think about the idea of avoidance, if we go back to those two variables, that's a low concern for yourself as well as a low concern for this other person. But here I think it's a little different in that I have a high degree of concern to make sure that you get your needs met. Sure. But I don't really have a high degree of concern for myself. Right. And so when I think about this idea of accommodation, I think that it can be very useful once in a while, right? So if I need to, again, it's no big deal for me, but I want to make sure that maybe I'm depositing that deposit in that emotional bank account. I want to maybe build up that social credit for you that I can cash in later, maybe. But I want to build up those social credits, right? So I might want to go ahead and accommodate. That might be another reason to do that.
Would you suggest? I mean, again, there are a lot of variables to assess the situation first, but would this particular style be a little bit more effective for someone who's trying to build their credibility as well, maybe as a new supervisor?
Yeah, it could be, but again, we also want to be careful that we don't get walked all over.
That's true.
At the same time,
Absolutely.
Right? So as a new supervisor, I think it's kind of important to kind of establish some establish your credibility, of course, but it's important to kind of create some strong expectations as well.
Sure.
Here's some other things that I think accommodation is useful, and this never happens to me, never, ever, ever, but when you're wrong. I mean, let's face it, sometimes people are just wrong. Now, if they can kind of come to their own realization of that, that's great, and then they have that self-awareness, because that allows for a more creative, maybe a little bit better solution that somebody else might have to kind of bubble up to the surface about things. So when you're wrong about things, certainly that might be a good idea to accommodate. And certainly if you're outmatched, I think this would be a good time. So, my boss sees it one way, I might see it a different way. Well,
going back to that authority
situation.
Yeah.
So the one thing I would be cautious about this is that sometimes if this is a habit, it becomes a habit, we often see a lot of that passive aggressive types of behaviors because people feel that they're always giving in, and they never ever get to win themselves. And so, that's when you see a lot of that passive aggressiveness kind of come out in people and in teams.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's important to look for that, I think, with our people, because they'll be very difficult sometimes to see, but I think that it is important to keep an eye out for when people are in those spaces, especially if it is somebody who is a yes person and maybe takes on too much or takes on other people's workloads too.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got we've had the idea of avoidance, low concern for self and others.
Right.
We've had the idea of accommodation, so I have a high degree of concern to let that other person needs get met, but not necessarily my own.
Right.
The next one that I think I want to address is the idea of competition. Okay. So in competition, what you have is I have a high degree of concern for myself and really don't care about you so much, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, this is that win-lose dynamic, right? I got to win, you have to lose.
Right.
That means my way's the right way, your way's the wrong way. That means I must be smart and you must be
dumb.
But there's always that sense of comparison, right?
There is.
When we approach people from that win-lose dynamic. And so I do want us to be careful about this. One thing I will also say to this is that in our culture, in the United States, in our Western culture, this is very common scripting.
It is.
But think about it. We all believe in that, competition, that survival of the fittest, the competition, that's kind of been ingrained in our particular culture. So it doesn't surprise me that this is a pretty common scripting for a lot of folks.
It is. And I think, we've talked about this on our podcast as well before, in the sense that when I came out of school, that was what was expected. You got to even maybe trample over people to get to where you need to go. And that sense of competition is completely ingrained in our society. However, I am hopeful because I'm seeing a change in kind of the modern workforce and what the expectations are. And you have to be a good team player now. You have to be utilizing some emotional intelligence and taking care of your team members.
We're doing so much more with people in groups and teams rather than that individualized work that work used to be.
Absolutely. And so the competing, probably not the best way to go about it all the time. I will say I tend to do this in my household.
And here's the thing. Again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe the way that we described it sounds pretty bad.
It does, yeah.
But again, there is a useful side to the idea of competition as well. So when do you think it might be helpful to maybe use this particular style in times of conflict?
Well, when I say I use it in my household, one of the main reasons I do is because typically there's a lot of very quick and decisive things that need to be made or done, and I'm a doer, and so we just kind of get it done kind of attitude. So if there's something that you
go get the child before he falls off the deck,
correct,
right?
And he certainly he's climbing everywhere. So, but I also think
by the way, that kind of reminds me. There used to be an old commercial about this leadership team walking through a jungle, and it just always reminded me of this and cracked me up. They're walking through the jungle, and one of the members of the team falls into some quicksand, and so the leader of the team stops and says, "Well, let's get a risk assessment committee put together to decide how we're going to handle this." Like, no, somebody needs to throw this person a rope, right?
Yes.
And so when you have those quick, decisive actions, yes, absolutely. Any other times you think that this might be a good time to settle into this style?
Well, I think especially for leaders, sometimes there are things that just kind of come down through the chain, different organizational changes or something, a new policy, right? And maybe it's going to be an unpopular course, and you just need to do it. And there's really not room for conversation about it. It is just it's
kind of like ripping the Band-Aid off. Because when you do that, then the healing can start as opposed to maybe picking at it. Yeah. So those unpopular courses of action, you're cutting costs. things like that, then it might be a better thing. Another thing I would also encourage people to think about with this particular style is, sometimes I find that things are just really important to me.
Sure.
They're important to my value system. They're important to my belief structures, or maybe it's really important to the survival of my team, the survival of my organization, whatever it happens to be. And if it's that important, I'm probably going to throw some skin in the game. I'm going to fight for it.
Sure.
Okay. And that's kind of thing. So I think that might be a good time to use it. And I will also give you one more. Okay. And me being that, blue harmonious person, I sometimes feel like I've taken advantage of my good humor and nature there. And so when I encounter people that this is their only style, sometimes I need to protect myself. So I need to stand up for myself once in a while. So that, just to get, so you're not getting taken advantage of,
Sure.
by people
Absolutely.
once in a while, then this might be a good style to use.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're an accommodator all the time. This is the style I would encourage you to maybe kind of start to explore a little bit more often.
Yes. And again, it's also figuring out which people to maybe assert that style with a little bit more, because it is gonna differ from person to person.
Really good point.
Yeah.
Really good point.
So.
Okay.
I'm gonna just kind of prep you all as we're kind of rounding out these styles. I want to just ask you, as you think through these, and some of the ones we've already gone through are avoiding, are accommodating, are competing. We got a couple more for you. I want you to be thinking about what style is your typical go-to.
Yeah. What's your default?
Yes. Yeah. Because we all have one. So now it's just kind of exploring the rest of them and figuring out where we'd want to start implementing them.
Okay.
So prep that.
So we've had those three. Here's number 4.
Yeah.
Okay, is the idea of compromise. And this is when you have a moderate degree of concern for yourself as well as others.
Right.
Right. So this, I think, is often another common thing, right? I mean, we grew up with this probably. We were taught to share our toys, take our turn, wait in line, take your turn. I mean, we've been kind of taught these kinds of things for a long time. And again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but the other side of this is that when we do compromise, usually both parties have to give up something.
Sure.
Right. So some people would even define this then as a kind of a lose-lose proposition.
Right.
Right. What are your thoughts about the idea of compromise?
Yeah, I think that there is, and I always find it interesting when we talk about this in trainings, because during one of the activities, I'm specifically thinking of a lot of people before they do the TKI assessment with us, will go through and will say, "Oh, well, I know my style is compromising." So I think in our minds, we really want to think that we do a good job of this. Because it sounds good.
Yeah.
And I think it is to a certain extent. But I certainly think that there are some consequences to always compromising, just like you said. And so understand that compromising should be kind of a temporary settlement. Like we may need to come back to it though. We may need to work through something a little bit more there.
Yeah, sometimes the conflict can be big. It can be, kind of a nasty situation to work through. But if you can maybe get a small compromise on maybe one little start of it, that can kind of help to build some momentum. So that it is good, I think, when you have that temporary settlement out here. But, it's looking for the middle ground.
It is.
Right, essentially. Other times that I like to use this is when I think that you and I, for example, might be really committed to the same goal, but we differ on how we get there.
That's a good point.
I think that's a really good opportunity for people to really kind of move into the idea of compromise, with that little give and take. I think that could be helpful. And the other time, I would think that would be helpful is the idea of, maybe we collaborate trying to get to that really win-win solution, but that's difficult and it's time consuming and sometimes we fail at it. So maybe as a substitute, when collaboration doesn't work, maybe we go back to. And I think that's important to think about, with these styles is, it doesn't have to always be just one, right? Maybe we start with the idea of collaboration, but we find that it's not working.
Right.
and we don't have the time to do it. So maybe we do go back to the idea of compromise and to look at the interplay maybe between these different styles. Could be helpful in some situations.
And you bring up a great point that I think is important to mention when we're considering assessing that situation that we talked about at the beginning. Think about the amount of time that you can commit to dealing with this conflict, because you're absolutely right. Collaboration is going to take a lot of time. Yeah. Just as much as if you're in that dispute stage already, that's going to take a lot of time. Right. And so how can we work through that without losing even more productivity than what we already are?
Right. So let's talk a little bit about collaboration then, because this is the high degree of self and concern for self as well as concern for others. And so that's where this space kind of takes place. Right. And to me, the idea of collaboration is that true win-win approach.
Right.
So it's not about you giving up a few of your things and I'm giving up a few of my things to reach that compromise. This is about making sure that all your needs and all of my needs are getting met in some way.
Yeah.
Now, as you said, that takes time. Usually with the idea of collaboration involves a heck of a lot of respectful communication.
Yes.
Respectful communication. It's about really delving into the problem, understanding each other's perspectives about the causes of those problems. And it's really then about identifying those win-win solutions. And working through that can take a long time.
Absolutely.
Okay? But I think you need this when, well, let me ask you, when do you think it's important to maybe approach people from this perspective?
Yeah, I think when we're really needing everyone to agree on the solution, like kind of having that integrative solution, something that everyone has buy-in to, that we can kind of be objective about. It's not like it's one person's idea over the other, that everyone has their needs, as we mentioned at the beginning, being met. I think that's a great place for it to start.
And if you need commitment.
Absolutely.
Right. You need that, like you said, that buy-in. If we don't approach it from a collaborative point of view and you really need that commitment from everybody involved, that's going to be hard because people can agree to something and then just not do anything about it.
Right.
Right. So are they really committed to it?
Right.
So if you really need that commitment, I think it's important. If you have the time,
right,
then I think that this is a pretty good thing. And the other thing I will say is, when you talk about those conflicts that kind of are in that dispute stage, sometimes this is a great way if you've got a broken relationship with somebody and you really need to come to a different reality about that. You really need to work through some of those emotions and some of those hard feelings that you've had. This is probably the way to go about it, doing it.
Absolutely. And I mean, to speak to that too, I feel like in a lot of workplaces I've seen, even clients we've spoke with, they say, well, the conflict's gone on too long now. We can't fix it. Like, it's just broken. We're never going to like each other. And my whole thing is you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And so give it a shot. And, it's going to require a little bit of vulnerability to come in and say, hey, something's just not meshing with us here. Are you feeling it too? And can we work through this?
Yeah. That's a great question. That's a great question, I think, to ask people that you might find yourselves in conflict with is, are you willing to find a mutually satisfactory resolution to this problem? Because at that moment, you're kind of forcing them with one of two options. You say, yes, I am. Well, then you know that they've committed probably to it.
Yeah.
But if they say, no, I'm not, well, maybe collaboration isn't the most appropriate strategy now.
Yeah.
It might be later, but maybe not right now. Okay. So it's a good question to ask.
Would you say if you have somebody who does say no, I mean, do we pursue that any further? Or
well, I would, and I guess the way that I would do that would be by asking again further questions.
Sure.
So I would probably say, get this person to maybe focus in on the benefits or the consequences of that decision that they just made. So I might ask the question, well, gosh, if we don't resolve this, if you and I can't come to some type of understanding about what we need to do here, then what are the negative consequences to us working together?
Right.
What's the negative consequences to our customer we're trying to serve? What's the negative consequences to our team? Sometimes helping people look at the outcomes of certain decisions can kind of maybe get them
sway
to
them
maybe
a little bit,
realize maybe a different approach might be more appropriate. So, I like to look at that, or look at the positive things if we're able to reach this conclusion. Look at the positive things. What kind of positive things might come to us, or to our customers, or to our team as a result of that. So that's one way that I try to get people re-engaged. But frankly, again, sometimes you need to maybe back up. Maybe you takes a little bit more time. Maybe you come back to it at a later point, later on. But there they are. Okay, so we got accommodation, we got avoidance, compromise, competing, and the idea of collaboration.
That's right.
So we want to ask you, what's your default? Knowing that we all use all of them at some point.
Right.
Which of the ones is the one or the two that you go back to over and over and over again?
Yeah, go ahead and share those with us in the comment section. Start typing those in. We're gonna go ahead and start calling out some of those as we see them, and no fault here. I mean, honestly, again, we all use something different. I admit it openly there. I tend to compete a little bit at home, but we have to start practicing, like putting things into practice, some of these different styles. And I really do like the TKI assessment, which Ray, who is on with us moderating there from her desk, and I, we're both certified in the TKI assessment. And thank you for that, Dewey, by the way.
You're welcome.
And so it's exciting, and I would encourage you to explore this a little bit more if it's something maybe that you struggle with. Again, people's level with level and comfort level with conflict is different. It's all over the board sometimes.
Yeah.
But there is one kind of main key thing that is underlying throughout this whole concept of managing conflict. And I think it comes back to how we communicate with people.
Absolutely. It's communications, it's the tool, right?
It
to
is.
kind of work with people to resolve conflict. Conflict is really nothing more than a problem that's looking for a solution, right? We need to come up with a solution. But in order to get there, you have to work together in order to do it, right? So how we do that is through our ability to communicate. So there are a couple, I think, important communication tips to kind of remember when you're working through conflict. My number one, and I read this from a book, and I think the book was called Crucial Conversations.
I love
Good
that
read.
book. It really is a great read.
Good read if nobody's ever read it before. But there was a quote in there that said, "When people become furious, you need to remain curious."
That's right. And
I think that's really helpful, right? That it's hard, like when Ray talked about, your emotions get hijacked a little bit. It's hard to sometimes do that, but take some deep breaths, calm down a little bit, put a little space between you and the conflict maybe, but you got to remain curious. So close this. Close this, open these up a little bit, and maybe ask some really good questions to maybe understand this other person's perspective.
And I think that's incredibly important maybe with your people who are going to be your avoiders too. And so, because they're not going to be forthcoming with as much information as to why they are where they are in this situation. But in general, I agree. We have to be able to pause and ask those really good questions. And I think we've somehow lost that. We've also lost another ability with this is when you ask those questions, you need to genuinely listen to the answers,
and not to listen to agree. To agree or disagree, but to listen to understand what this person is saying.
Absolutely. And one of the things I'm so grateful I learned a long time ago at a training, there's a Chinese symbol. It's called Ting, and it's actually the symbol for listening. And you can look it up there. It's really neat though. But the symbol itself actually includes the eyes, the ears, the mind, and the heart, because it's all of it when you're listening to somebody. It's not just the ears like a lot of us think, all right? It's minding your mental chatter, making sure you're actually tuned into what somebody's saying. It's knowing what's in your heart, and can you genuinely and openly listen to the person who's communicating with you.
And that leads me to that communication tool of empathy.
It is.
Yeah, yes. Empathy is really critical. And demonstrating empathy to others doesn't mean you agree with them.
No,
it just means you understand them, and more importantly, kind of how they feel about it.
Yes.
And that's empathy, right? But it doesn't mean that you have to understand.
It is.
You have to agree.
And here's the thing, and I really want people to recognize. I think there's this misconception that somehow by demonstrating empathy, you have to put yourself in their shoes. And I think that that's impossible, Dewey. Like we all come from so many different backgrounds and different experiences and beliefs and values. And put it there, it's all different. But what I do know is what certain emotions look like. I've felt sadness before. So empathy is connecting with an emotion, not with the situation. And so let's be very clear on that as you start going out and trying to maybe demonstrate more empathy. We all know what general feelings are like, and we felt them before. That's how we connect with people.
Yeah. I guess finally, I would just encourage people to be respectful, of others as they kind of work through these conflictual situations. Somebody said, I think Ray said that even though I don't like conflict, I probably tend to either avoid or compete just because I don't want it to be, just because she wants it to be over with. So she's looking for quick solutions then to kind of, to do that. So thank you, Ray. I wonder what the rest of you, what your conflict styles have a tendency to be.
Let us know.
What are yours?
Oh, conflict styles. So in the office, I certainly think it's acquiescing. And then I think at home, it's competing.
Okay. All right. Me, I accommodate way too much, probably. That'd be my fault. Yeah, that's my fault.
Is that like all spaces?
I'm a softie. I give in to the
Oh, that's what we love about you, dude. You're a great leader.
Thank you.
But we are great. I'm grateful that we have viewers on today that are interested in this topic. Oh, it looks like Valerie joined in, says that she competes, especially at home. My fellow tribe here. This is good. Yes. But it's not always helpful. I'll tell you, there are times my husband and I have to have those conversations of, look, you need to tame it, Brianna. But overall, again, take care of each other. You know, when you're in the workspace, it's important that we recognize this conflict can be used for good. It can be innovative. It can be creative. We can move ahead and probably bigger, stronger, better than we were before.
Absolutely. Especially if we remember to take time to assess that situation, learn from our mistakes, learn from these conflictual situations we find ourselves in, so that we're better prepared the next time that we get into them.
Yes. And I like to ask that, we've had it here on our team. Let us be very frank. MTI is not immune to conflict. But when we've had those situations and, we all sometimes needed just a breather, which is totally appropriate. And then we come back together, and what could we do differently next time? Next time this happens, because there will be a next time. All right.
Yeah, and I think it's gotten better too, as a result of us learning through those situations.
Yes, I agree. So with that, if you guys have any questions, we're going to start kind of wrapping up here. I want to kind of make a quick transition because this is like our second to last Facebook Live for this year.
For this year. We'll be back next year, of course.
We will. Yeah, we have one more scheduled. I believe it's the 16th, so whatever 2 weeks from today is. And then 2022 happens.
Where the time goes.
I know. But we have a lot of great things coming up in 2022. New things, exciting things. So if you haven't signed up for our newsletter yet, I'm going to drop the link in the comments section, and I'd love for you all to sign up for that newsletter so you can see what we have going on at MTI in 2022. It's going to include things like these, like our podcast still, The Weekly Workplace. You can find that on Podbean, Spotify, Apple. I feel like a promo person now.
Shameless.
I know. Little plugs. But then we're going to start something fresh and something new, and we're going to do these kind of like focus sessions, 20-minute focus sessions, kind of similar to this, but in a Zoom room where we're kind of more personal and one-on-one with people. And so I say one-on-one, but they could get kind of large depending on who all attends. But be looking for those things, and we encourage you to be a part of it. This is for you. We recognize people and their time is limited, but we want to meet you with where you're at. So are you excited about 2022, Dylan?
I am getting excited about 2022. Yeah. I'm hoping that it's a bright new future.
Yes. And I will say too, we do have the one thing that will be consistent from 2021 is our supervisory certificate series. And we do talk more in depth about this concept of conflict in that supervisory certificate series. And so if you're interested, I'm going to go ahead and let's make sure I don't click the wrong one. But there, up on your screen is a QR code. If you'd like to find out more information for our supervisory certificate series, which will happen in February, I will be teaching that one, and it's going to be a hybrid. It's the first time we're doing that,
I think it's great.
Yeah, so if you are more comfortable logging in from online, or excuse me, from home, or joining us in person, you get to choose. So we're making that new change in 2022, and we hope you'll come along with us on that journey. So lots of great things. Yeah. Lots of great things.
Things to look forward to.
Yes, it is. I'm not seeing any other questions come in. So Dewey, would you like to do our sign off?
Oh, I'll do Ray's. Go be great, everybody.